Vault 23's records, reference material, classification, events records system, status, relevant historical note. The Class A creature, the infected, classic zombies. Fully infected by Unit 731 gas, but not dead yet. Although most did die, a range from the atomic event seems to be a factor. When captured, they show no signs of life, yet are active. Law Agent Number 8 described them best as smart as predatory cows. The Class B creature, the masked infected. These people suffered radioactive damage, but little of the none of the effects of the Unit 731 gas. The Class B creatures show most commonly in misshapen forms, commonly still wearing the mask. The Class B are not dead as Class A. This took several years for law officers to discover. Once learned, they stopped the shoot-all policy. Class C creatures, the living infected. They may have survived the atomic event either as people in gas masks or far enough from the infected area, usually remaining unmutated, and pass it on to children. If mutations or infections later surface, they will be reclassified as a Class D. The majority of the population of the Rad Zone are unknowingly listed as Class C. The Class D creature. The unofficial calling of a hybrid, but a subheading is needed to assure the Class D title is not given to all we cannot identify. An example, the Class D blood drinker or the Class D unknown. It can also include modified versions of the Class A, such as with the law officers. Class E creatures. Ethereal, spiritual creatures. The effects of the atomic energy on other types of energy, such as spiritual energy, are unknown, except for as examples of Class E creatures we have in the Rad Zone. Also, new discoveries have shown a level of mental mutations in Class C creatures. Class X creatures. Special class used to identify makers of others. While being an effect on the Rad Zone experiments, Law 23, the Grand Inquisitor, as well as the Atomic Skull, Dr. White, and others, for example, they are mutating or altering the subjects of the Rad Zone beyond the original event. In a way, altering the discoveries of the experiment. The atomic event. Vault 23 record, reference number 000. This is classified as an event. Its current status is none because the event has expired, while the level of its infection are the basis of the rest of the Vault 23 levels. Description. Date September 1st, 1944. Date redaction is unneeded. Date of event is public. The atomic event is what is known as publicly when the Hanford Experimental Energy Plant exploded. Thankfully, it was not a true atomic explosion. It was an explosion that contained radioactive material, a sort of dirty bomb. The plant had been attacked by an experimental nerve gas traced to Unit 731, while it was the dying workers that led to the plant's explosion. The action was later discovered to be of an obvious planned attack by the Japanese to keep the experimental atomic bomb from being used on them. As Hanford was part of the Manhattan Project, it should also be noted for history that the plant was found to be working perfectly, proving that if the Manhattan Project had not been cancelled, the atomic bomb would have been developed. The following addendum is an attempt to understand the following infections and their sources of infection and mutation, and therefore the classification of the entire zone to be known as the radiation zone, more publicly the Rad Zone. Addendum A. The gas. See Unit 731 for details. Those infected by the gas, most died. Few survived as Class A creatures. Some made it to gas mask. Some of those survived rescue missions. But some of those were still infected, and this created Class B creatures and the alternate Class C creature. The radiation. Addendum B. Infection by radiation was less detectable at first, and sometimes may only come to play at death. Its ethereal state seems to affect the spiritual world more, ghosts, etc. The more your common, classic, undead, unraised, ghouls, etc. These are your classic type E creatures, though. Otherwise, the radiation was more in its effects on mutations of those that survived and were exposed later, as well as later generations. Addendum C. Hybrids. This is where it gets weird. The hybrid is infected with the gas and the radiation. Some may be masked. These can be from secondary infections. An example, a barrel of radioactive waste instead of from the explosion. These tend to be the most dangerous as well as the most unexpected. Where exposure to radiation usually kills, the mutational effects are enhanced in the hybrid. End of entry 000. The Atomic Committee. Lab 23 number X001 to X005. So-called the Hanford Elite. Classification, Class X creatures, mutagenics, infections. This is a compilation of 5 actual people who were the opening dangers after the Class D as they approach the actual plant. Status of 001 is dead. Occupation was a doctor. He had progressed upon being known as the first skull, atomic skull. He was captured and executed. Status of 002, dead. Atomic engineer. Imprisoned till death. Based upon death, we believe it was his own infection, his own mutations. Based or upon his own experimentation, that information we don't have. 003, dead. He was a mad doctor, as in a doctor from a madhouse. Another skull. The other Dr. X001 was the one that actually helped 003 to be mutated and to become an atomic skull, also believing it led to a cure. Once he found out that X001's it was not a cure, he committed suicide. 004, missing. He was a mad scientist, suspected dead. We just can't find a body. Not unusual. But we are paranoid, so. 005 is dead. He was management. He died due to mutational explosion and possession. It's from supposedly an outside spirit. Now, the Science Council responsible for rogue experiments done after the atomic event. Mad scientists, mad doctors, atomic engineer. They were organized by X005, whose business was management. Chances they had retreated into a safe bunker before the explosion, or they knew it was coming. Exploration of the probable bunker site by agents. They came back with readings that showed the bunker had still been infected. These are 5 of the so-called most intelligent survivors from the original atomic flash. So they realized the current policy was that they were going to be killed by the agents. So they hid in the underground, then went to work on curing it, or so they believed. When the factory, as it was called, was discovered, it was found that they had been also gathering other survivors. Survivors believing they'd been saved, and then being experimented on. What was created was not a cure. They had no information about the 731 gas, so they assumed the radiation was solely responsible. The main outcome was something we titled golems, melon-headed, tumor-filled mutagen monsters. See Golem, vault number D35. The Atomic Committee was in charge in this game. The enemy was fighting back, then reflected by the entire Class X system. Therefore, then the Grand Inquisitor was not enlisted in the vault prior to this. Class X stands with the same level of threat as Vitals, a rare class of creature that can actually pass on the infection. Because they can create more, as well as increase their level of evolutionary adaptation they gain, X's are altered or mutagenic effects upon the Radzone environment. They create those that are listed in Vault 23. They are the mutagen equivalent of arms dealers. The Grand Inquisitor. Lab 23's number X006. Classification, Class X creature. Status, currently in charge of the security of the entire Radzone. The Grand Inquisitor was sent from the outside to the inside. He gave up ever being able to leave to assure a strict control from the inside, and to best assure that those living within the walls are allowed to live a safe, although limited life. No reason to make it uncomfortable. Some say he has the final word of the Extinction Clause and his own employed militia, the law agents. The Grand Inquisitor has experimented with a way of removing the damaged tissue, then replacing the missing tissue with mechanics, as with the creation of the Class D005 Law Series. The main service of the Inquisitor is to the true threat of the public safety. It is unknown and unexpected. The infected civilian who dies one night might awaken to eat his wife. Policy of being alert and aware is properly propagated among the civilians. Then he will send agents to retrieve the subjects and assure if there is a level of infection. Very little information seems to survive the redaction of X006's files, but it is admitted that the Grand Inquisitor is here to protect us from the undead horde and each other, as well as completely be in charge of the Vault 23 reference files. The Grand Inquisitor was flown in to the Radzone 24 hours after the initial atomic flash, reference 000. By taking on this mission, he will forever had given up his chance to leave. He led the first soldiers in which heavy losses were experienced before they found out what they were dealing with. Class D destroyed over half the initial rescue forces within 6 hours. Any defeated were taken to the Grand Inquisitor, Lestrange. He studied them, determined the initial codes of engagement, then dealt with the loss of military forces by recruiting locals as well as the recent dead. The Living Altered Weapons program, law agents, was started based upon what the Grand Inquisitor had learned about the Class Ds. His own use of law officers' experimentation allowed a balance of power to be restored within the walls, as well as leading to the work with Micklin Hospital towards the inoculation of other medical advances. With the help of the recently created law enforcement system, the creatures were driven back into the fringes. He had Law 23 start this record system to further his research. It occasionally has led to some immunization shots and its required boosters. These programs have allowed a form of peace
for those who survive within the zone. A check debit card system was applied to deal with the government's security checks, which they all get, as being living guinea pigs to the atomic progress, as well as food stamps. In a short time, all legal currency exchange is done by this credit system, with any cash being destroyed and radioactively infected. But it still shows up on the black market. This is how the Grand Inquisitor has brought peace to us all. But be assured, he has his hand on the button that could end this experiment.
The infection. Vault 23's record 001. Classification mutagen. Status: the infection is contained within the red zone and the dead zone. Description: to see effects of the 000 atomic flash event, infection of populace is not definite but contained in its extent by walls and a quarantine status. Those within the walls are to regain regardless of level of infection. It is policy that all in the area when the event 000 occurred are to never leave or they will face termination. Termination of populace would have been completed if not for the need for the information on the atomic forces upon the human body, for the sake of the safety of later atomic workers and soldiers. If the accident had not happened, a separate plan to infect the Alaskan natives, called Project Chariot, was set up to test the effects. Most publicly saw those within the wall as dead. Funerals were held across the nation for those still active within the walls. Insurance policies even paid up for their deaths. The initial finds made little sense as the mutagen's effects of atomic energy were not repeatable, at least till they discovered Unit 731's gas attack. The mutagen effects upon the living, and in some cases the dead, became a factor when these two combined. It should be noted that the effects of radiation on the spiritual or living energy of a place, but was widely decided that the public did not need to be bothered with that. Those infected may never show any signs of infection, and do not always regenerate or degenerate to a Class A creature at death. The Grand Inquisitor has experimented with ways of removing the damaged tissue, then replacing the missing flesh with mechanics, as with the creation of the Class D creatures 005 law officers. His technical skill for this sort of iron necromantic surgery at first impressed me, but since then my own skills have gotten better, but the actual concept as to what is happening I don't know or understand. If I did, it would probably be erased or redacted. Unit 731. Vault 23's records 002. Classification mutagen. Status: closed at the end of World War II. Japanese lab found in China. Not truly a Vault 23 record, as much as a reference to a location out of the USA that led to the current Radzone situation. More specifically, the atomic flash. Info about the organization is available through standard library research. In the war crimes trials, it was decided that the intention of the chemical attack by the Japanese was to kill people working at the Hanford site, out of fear of the atomic bomb. The resulting explosion was not in the plan, so they accepted the personal lives lost at the plant as their fault, as an act of war, while the resulting property damage was not their fault. Later discoveries after the war crimes trials would come to the facts that the infection was once their intent. While leaving the plant intact, they had failed in their test to try to reanimate amputated body parts of Chinese prisoners of war. An accidental exposure of the test subjects and their immediate and violent death by what seemed to be some sort of flesh degenerative virus. Afraid of further exposure, they had disposed of the bodies in a massive bonfire. as well as all things exposed. This is probably why they never saw the signs of the later stages of the infection. The sudden and violent death of the subjects convinced them it was the perfect weapon to save their nation. Later, unreliable discovered papers connected to the original exposure and its disposal to a large number of illnesses and deaths at the prison side of the Unit 731 labs. They reported the exposure to a smoke from a large bonfire entered the courtyard, and all within suddenly dropped to the ground. They had all entered a state of coma. It is unknown currently what happened to these coma patients. Chances are they were executed to save the Japanese military from having to pay for their care. For further info, look up Unit 731 in your standard National Library. The Zombie. Vault 23's classification number 004. Classification: a Type A creature. Status: contained at outbreak. Observe for more possible citizens of the Rad Zone. The knowledge of these records came from the number 1 through number 12 Law Agent Creations by the Grand Inquisitor. Although the information of such experiments has been redacted from memory and records, for I am of a later model. Class A creature, those infected with the gas, mass or not. In later stages, it seems it is unresponsive to pain, while it hungers for those who are not infected, possibly in a way to regain its health. They seem slow or listless in the average. They can speed up in short spurts, as well as show increased strength, but due to the damaged own rotting form can easily lead them to injury. In addressing the rotting flesh, what first seemed to be a decaying body is actually the form of starvation, as the body is feeding upon itself. They do seem to show a strange desire to eat brains. This is lucky for humanity, although many classic films seem to fail to notice this. It seems that Class A 004 or 005 needs its brains to function, so most they catch, they eat the brain, and no new zombie is born. No brain to drive the newly infected body. While one can become infected, but if they escape, they will probably live, but may mutate further after a massive trauma occurs, involving death or not. Class A 001. An infection, but shows no signs and will not proceed without further actions or infections. Probably does not even know they are infected. Most of the citizens in the Rad Zone fall into this classification. Type A 002. Has suffered damage, mental or physical, and shows signs of infection, like surviving damage or healing beyond the normal. Seems to be a reaction of the body trying to protect itself. Types A003 to types A005, the classic zombie shell. The classification D005 is built upon. Basically, an infection caught right before it enters the first hunger. An A003 becomes a 004 after its first feeding, and is irreversible, a classic zombie headshot to kill. While the A005 is beyond regret or emotion, an A004 may choose an unknown target over a once friend, as well as show some signs of regret if they do kill those they once knew. Classification A006. A rare type of Class A that seems to evolve beyond the base form. Many examples of this is the rare zombie infector. She could pass the infected on, and the zombie humongous. He was very big. He actually ate other Class A and added this to his own form, beyond regeneration, adding to its overall constitution and size. Law officers. Living altered weapons. Lab 23 number 005 ##. Should be followed by a number ID. Classification Class D creatures, second generation. Status location is quarantined within the rad zone 005 #005-01. Under control of the Grand Inquisitor X-006. Near to nothing is recorded, or at least still, about the actual technique of how or what is done when the Grand Inquisitor raises one of these things from the dead. So in gathering little pieces from other files, we have the Grand Inquisitor's experiment with a way of removing the dead tissue, or damaged tissue sometimes, then replacing the missing flesh with mechanics, as you would with prosthetics. The Living Altered Weapons program was started based upon what the Grand Inquisitor had learned about the Class Ds. The creatures were driven back into the fringes. He had Law 23 start this record system, further his research. It occasionally has led to some immunization shots as well as its required boosters. Law officers answer to their own internal command structure, or to the Grand Inquisitor. It seems that the Inquisitor, even on these things, wired through a switchboard of some sort, that he can keep in contact with them all. I am trying to record this and having it turning up blank the next day, so I'll try to keep this as vanilla as possible. When a field soldier gets too infected, over 50%, they are labeled as a Class A creature, as well as started to behave as one. Should they, then the Grand Inquisitor, Lestrange, removes the infection and replaces it with a non-infected machinery or flesh when available or applicable. This is an improvement because of the other option was death, and there is no chance of surviving from outside the wall, solving two problems at once. As well as the security of the military, use of the law officers both in the rad zone and out, recruitment and replacement was vital. As well as use of law officers in Vault 23 based experimentation of the imprisoned. That or humans. Final thing I will state about the law officers, my own experience, this is simply this. I am a medic and a doctor. I see dead and alive and have really lost the understanding between the two. They are getting difficult to identify. I just have sensors that inform me that they are or are not. Law Enforcement, Office of Law. Vault 23 number 012. Classification, location, Kennewick. Status, Law Enforcement Military HQ of the Grand Inquisitor. Main function of this location is the HQ of the Grand Inquisitor. The law office is not a police station. Those still exist to serve the expected purposes. The main use of the Office of Law is infection discovery and eradication, while behind the doors they also have a National Guard office for its rad zone general, while the guards still deal with civilian control. The true power of the Inquisition is as a factory, see the factory, to create and enhance law officers. In any situation involves the Office of Law, it's under martial law. All power starts and stops there. So I will explain my factory comment with the following facts. The original 12 law officers were the outcome of the Grand Inquisitor's autopsy of the Class D infected of the early days of the atomic event. There are others before these 12, but those were not fully functional. I have been informed that every one of the first 12 had at least one prototype. Functionally, upon further study, I find these early agents
had flesh elements of the very Class D creatures they were fighting, basically sewed on or attached in some way. Since then, the path to becoming a law officer begins with being a soldier that works in the dead zone or the rad zone, not police or civilians, who happen to have the bad luck of becoming infected, but does not have the basics of military training. Infected civilians are a dime a dozen, and the police have a questionable alliance. Civilians can join the National Guard, those who protect the zone. Then once that's proven, then they may become law officers. But they don't make law officers from civilians. Instead of putting a bullet in the head of this soldier that's been infected, the Inquisitor removes damaged tissue while replacing infected areas with Iron Age technology. For this reason, every officer is different. It depends on how the infection has spread. It is illegal for anyone but the Grand Inquisitor or Law Number 23 to work on a law officer. That includes basic medical care. Service as a law officer is at danger pay every day. Basically, it's at double rate, commonly spent to support the family. Specifics. Law officer. Law stands for large assault weaponry. Physical traits. Typical strength of a law officer is double humanity, then again enhanced by structural support. Healing enhanced by food. Mental traits. When a typical law officer can match human intellect, is available for use like in stories or skills. Typical, each agent has one master chip slot or more and a slave. Every officer has an adjustable clip that affects weight wellness. Finally, I'd like to mention the elaborate yet fully needed tunnels under the lofts. These soldiers not only fight when needed as well as keep control over the other heads of government, they are used to study the further infected we have in confinement. If we had any confinement, that is, which we don't. Final note on the law office. This is where any inquisitions are done, as well as any imprisonment of those under investigation. Number 9. Law Officer. Vault 23, number D00509. Classification, Class D creature. Status, dead and inactive. Main reason number 9 has its own entry is because it is the last of the Grand Inquisitor's original 12. The ones he walked out of the dead zone with. You may have noticed the question as to its current stage. I have studied the body and it is dead, even by necromancer status. But it is given fuel or food in a liquid form. The Inquisitor seems to be able to control it, use it. Number 9 operates upon a trained dog level, as well as fueled by and controlled by the Inquisitor. My theory is its living portion is gone. What remains is a skeletal holding a robot. I have heard some other law agents say 987 as a sort of do you need to live forever statement right before danger. It actually means 9, 8 as in food, number 7 to live, or as you could call it, unlive. It was a bad situation. Since this date, number 9 has had what remained of its face and lower jaw removed and attacked by the newest atomic skull, as in Dr. White. But I must state concerns. Number 9 is a zombie with an armored head. It is listed as dead because its life stage is gone. It remains in a separate location, inactive. I, myself, have not seen a body yet. A personal note that I have to inform is any law officer can be so altered into his service, and if for public safety it becomes so, you will make that choice. As he has said, make yourself useful or get on the surgical table. I will find a use for you. But you do have a choice, except no one gets out.
For the first time, redacted documents leave only complaints. D005009 physical traits. Typical strength, that of a double humanity for a law agent. Typical for law agents, I guess I should state. Then again, enhanced further by structural support. Healing enhanced by intake of food, we'll call it. Mental traits. While typical law officers can match human intellect at about 0.9. Number 9 is greatly damaged, but its senses have altered. Basically a bloodhound. If it finds a gun, it'll probably beat someone with it. The Walking Corpse. Vault 23, reference 0007. Classification, type D creature. Status mostly unidentified and executed or manufactured and controlled. The Class D creature, an unofficial calling of a hybrid, but its subheading is needed to assure that the Class D title is not given to all that we may not identify, as in the Class D blood drinker or Class D unknown. It can also include modified versions A, or such as the law agents, or Class C, as in Agent Riddle PI. The following addendum is an attempt to understand the classical infection. They can be thinking of feral depending upon level of infection. Class D status has originally related to a code of delete on encounter, while on the battlefield it was for demon, not an official standing. After the original creation of the identifying process, it was found that Class D were actually two different classifications. The original was the poor individuals that received a full face of atomic flash, both units 731 gas and radiation, but not luckily enough to die. Or maybe they did. In the early days of the Radzone Wars, those are commonly referred to as demons. Local native shamans supported this as saying the explosion had torn the dream barrier. See Wendigo and Skinwalker. Most of these died in the days following Event 000. The exposure was so much, and they slowly disintegrated. Their remains even still release radiation. Later, the experiments carried out upon the Class A infection was labeled as Class D. I believe it is the Inquisitor's desire to create the Class D. This is why the Class D classification is hybrids. Others, such as the Atomic Skull, 3 of these have been recorded, is typically the infected Class A using science to overcome their own infection, altering their own form. Early discoveries in these cases had led to the Inquisitor's own experiments. Shamans still claim that some original Class D still live in the dead zone. Start recording. Columns. Vault 23, number 035. Classification, type D creature. Status, eradicated. End, location, destroyed. The factory. When the factory, as it was called, was discovered, it was found that the Atomic Council had also been gathering survivors, then experimenting on them. What they created was not a cure. They had no information about the 731 gas, so it assumed the radiation was solely responsible. The main outcome was finally something we titled golems. Melon-headed, tumor-filled, mutagenic monsters. More in the context of the flesh or clay golem of many religious doctrines. Later discovered doctrines of one of the Atomic Council, X-003, a renowned mad doctor. He believes the savage action of those infected were due to damage to the brain from the infection. They were crazy, not mindless monsters.
This was made worse by the method of cure they used. It seemed that when you take those already infected and try to target and kill the infected tissue, it causes the tissue to grow, as well as to become cancerous. A strange discovery I made when I was investigating one of these we had in containment. It seems that they are not only cancerously infected, they are in some way genetically altered. Strangely enough, along the lines of a jellyfish or single-cell being. Given time, they seem to lose most sense, but they can still seem to know their location, though. Although it has been noted that you will see them taste the air around them, as best described. The one we had in containment has been there long enough that is altered enough to actually change color, like a chameleon. Commonly, it will taste the air before changing. It should be noted that I'm incorrect about certain details of my above report. The information is correct, but not as to when it occurred. We have never had a golem, and they were all destroyed in the factory. If we could have kept the factory, we would have done so, but the resources to hold the area is too high.
The Rad Zone. Lab 23's classification number 010. Classification, location. Status, location is quarantined. Location 001, Rad Zone, home. In Federal Code, the homestead. The Rad Zone is a cone. The rounded point starts at the remains of the Hanford plant and follows the original cloud path southeast to the three cities of Richland, Kennewick, and Pasco, as well as all the suburbanite homes surrounding the area. A wall was placed to protect the rest of the nation from the Rad Zone and its people. On the inside, there are walls to protect the survivors from uncontrolled infected zones known as dead zones. But these are smaller. Hanford was a plant built on a flat piece of land. Slow-moving zombies are easy for snipers, and sometimes taken on as a hobby, seen as an event in a smaller Findlay or West Richland area. For further information, see dead zones. All infected are the legal responsibility of law enforcement, as well as the property of the Grand Inquisitor. He is given a code for mutual behavior. 1. The wall surrounds the entire area. It is illegal for anyone to leave the zone. You will be shot. Very limited and few medical experts have dual status, and they must be monitored for infection. No public access to flight vehicles is allowed. Subsetting A. Towns. Existing government, although thinned down, is to remain in power, including police. Law enforcement holds final say, but does not handle standard police work. Category B. Outlying suburbanites. They have the option of actually appointing an individual sheriff if they feel it's necessary. The river has been recycled through rerouting to ensure the water for those inside and ensure the clean water for those in the rest of the state. A reroute of the Columbia River and the Snake River was done, while a water table of the rivers in the zone was set up with the locks between the Ice Harbor and Wanapum dams so as to slosh the water back and forth and hinder the stagnation of waters. The Dead Zone. Lab 23 number 011. Classification, location. Status, quarantine within the Rad Zone. Between the Hanford Wall and the Rad Zone civilized area, there is an open area littered with a series of towers where they can shoot any crossing infected threats. Entrance and exiting of this area demands a radioactive scan, while checks for infection has proven of little use, as to most in the Rad Zone, which encompasses the Dead Zone, are infected as well. Residents of the dead zone tend to see this as a choice of freedom over the police state, and most do have their own sheriffs. The main areas are Hanford Hills, west of Richland, Over, and the Pasco Farms. Each of these has its own sheriff and sees itself as autonomous from the rest of the Rad Zone. His only job tends to be to talk to law officers or even local police, as you'll be informed by the public there. There are only smaller neighborhoods that are also keep to their own security, spread around the area. From law enforcement and its Grand Inquisitor, these areas are in locations with questionable levels of radioactive activity or infectious exposure. They have been left unguarded. The Grand Inquisitor not only sees these areas as too far gone and not cost effective to protect, they are also vital to the Rad Zone's existence. He states without a place for the outlaws to go, they can only turn on you. In truth, these areas are also crucial in experimentation and observation of the effects of the infection and the radiation, especially in regards to how the two interact. A sheriff will occasionally call for assistance in a case of something that is beyond his ability to kill. The situation involving the evolution of a Class A creature, possibly to a level 6 at times, has caused for this. As well as I, Law Agent number 23005-23, am on a call in case of such infectious outbreaks occur. In such cases of biohazard outbreak, the true authority, the Grand Inquisitor, will take over. Such events are locally called an inquisition. Any resistance will lead to execution till the infection is evaluated and cleaned. In short, they only call for the Inquisitor as a last case situation. Inquisitions can still lead to burnings. Dr. Vladislav Vladinsky. Vault 23, number X013. Classification: a Class X creature. Status: dead. Plane happened to be without proper ID and left while leaving the zone. Vladimir Petrovich Vladslav was once a Soviet scientist and organ transplant pioneer who performed several transplantations in the 1930s and 1940s, up until the 1950s, such as the transplant of a heart into an animal and a lung heart replacement in an animal. He also well known for the transplantation of heads on dogs. He conducted his experiments head transplant during the 1950s, resulting in a two-headed dogs, and this ultimately led to the transplant in monkeys by Dr. John White, who was inspired by Vladislav's work. Once he defected to America, he was assigned to the Tesla project of Area 51. He left there before the stories of the extraterrestrials started. Towards the closing days of World War II, he went on to use his skills in the medical emergency of the Rad Zone. He spent his last days as the head doctor of the Michelin Institute, helping train Dr. White. After his death, his doctor, Miss Rosetta, released his papers that led to the patients of the newest infected defending drug titled Elixir Vitae. In his later days, it was found that he had returned to some of the more questionable experiments. Some point to complete head transplantation. One such points to the reason he took chances to get the infection of being trapped in the Rad Zone was to work with Dr. John White, who was in the area when the atomic zone event happened, all to get the new body for an aging mind. He was continuing in his dog experiments, using them to test the Elixir Vitae before it was perfected, such as in model DX01301 Zeno, his first two-headed dog, back in Russia, before he defected in World War I. It was resurrected partially. DX013-2, Cerebus, three-headed, Vladislav's own dog. It ate a zombie and an additional heads were after partial resurrection. Addendum.
Upon review of this document, it was pointed out to me that a reader of this report may need further definition of partial resurrection. Partial resurrection was a stage of existence discovered by Dr. Vladislav, commonly misidentified in Class A creatures stages 1 through 3, or in a more historical note, the stage of mind, the typical voodoo-style zombie. A non-infected can seem the same to others if they are extremely intoxicated. They are alive, but just not aware. Okay. The Factory. Vault 23, number 022. Classification, location, near ground zero. Status, cleansed and sealed, yet may still be infected. See additional files, the Atomic Council, and the Golems. The last moments of the atomic event, a group of those scientists and doctors ran for the bunker they had prepared already on the site. It should be noted that it is still a question why they had the bunker, and that not only could it protect them from the effects without knowing for sure what the effects would have been. After they exited the bunker, they found it was not quite what they expected. Worse, though, even. They knew the government policy would probably be burn and churn, so they began their own capture, trap, and experiment labs, while they also went on to try to cure themselves. They had not taken into account the mutational effects upon the infection. Each layer of the cure only made it worse. By the time the invasion of the Grand Inquisitor happened, the experiments had been so altered that they almost lacked any identifying marks, or even correct number of limbs. It was impossible to find or detect who these golems were before alteration. The Atomic Council had succeeded in some experiments. Because of their failures, they held the grounds of the factory for a week so the Inquisitor could study and explore the factory. Some say it had effects on the design of the Office of Law. National Guard and the Law Inquisitor, private forces of law office, burned the golems in the factory before they left. The Inquisitor has said it could have held the position longer. He would have, but the mental strain and headache the place gives you, as well as the enhanced chances of infection, the old chambers held the golems were so radiant infected they could probably still infect someone who were there long enough. The place was destroyed because of its mind control and influence device the AC had made for the cure. AC being the Atomic Committee.
Atomic Skull. The third, known as Dr. White. Vault 23, number 096. More specifically, DX96. Classification, Dr. White, as a Class D creature through self-modification. Originally would have been a Class A. Current status, deceased. First of all, the Atomic Skull is an oddly repeating series of mutations that starts with a Class A creature, 004, commonly called a zombie. In fact, the Class A creature is anyone who is infected. 98% of the Atomic Flash event range were infected, yet has shown no effects of exposure, but they are still infected. In this case, 3 times known so far, the infected was one intelligent enough to devise a possible cure based upon his limited information that they had at the time of their own infection. None have succeeded, while Dr. White has come the closest to date. Dr. White's cure, it involved the use of radiation in small doses to destroy the infected tissue, then use Vladislav's elixir, a work in progress, to reverse the effects of the infection. Actually, a second-hand copy he extracted from the notes taken by Nurse Rosetta. So we refer to it as Elixir X because he used the formula on multiple other outcome of the experiments. What White thought was a regenerative formula, which he used to return his own looks to normal, only works if you were infected. So he started infecting his patients as part of the cure, not fully understanding that he was simply adding a mutagen to the formula. The effects of this type of infection and additional exposure to attempts at a cure follow a wide but determinable ability. What starts as an infection, it seems that as the infection tries to cure it himself, through the desire to survive, the superhuman core to the infected drives them to a path that only strengthens themselves and the infection. They will become smarter. This leads to the main visible signs of what is going on under the surface. As parts of the brains die, the infection creates new paths for the brain to operate. Like a race car on high octane, the redesigning of the brain forces the brain up against the skull, so it expands to make way for the brain. This causes the skull to come forward and stretch out the face around the now larger eyes, looking like a skull face. On top of the skull-like face, they do start to actually glow as they use their abilities. The brain activities working at such level of the skull that it actually starts to heat up. The effects is not only noticeable in the dark. The greatest threat of the atomic skull is the power levels and the invisible effects upon them with the mental strength. Atomic skulls have been known to have immense powers combined with the intellect of the deadly level abilities, showing telekinesis, forced blood clots, and lobotomies. All done by mind. No signs of how. The target is just dead. No evidence. In addition, it should be noted that with Dr. White, he could do lobotomies prior to the infection due to his medical skills. Without this knowledge, he probably could not have done them.